With the release of the patch notes for Season 3 of Diablo 4, we actually got a new build coming up, and that one is going to be Bone Spirit. With the aspect that you can see on the screen right here, actually a lot of possibilities are opening up when it comes to Bone Spirit. As you can see, whenever you're going to cast a Bone Spirit, you're also going to launch 18 Bone Splinters in all 360-degree directions, dealing 400% increased damage and generate 6 essence per enemy hit. Now, I was theory crafting that, and there's basically two ways to do this. You either scale your Bone Splinters damage, or you use that as generators to instantly refill your essence to keep casting Bone Spirits over and over. While I was theory crafting the first version, the one that basically scales your Bone Splinters damage completely out of control and just uses the Bone Spirit to trigger the Bone Splinters, I came to the conclusion that that is not going to be very viable. The only problem that you have with the Bone Splinters is actually that they are not going to pierce the targets. So if you have like 2 or 3 rows of enemies that are basically coming towards you, you're only going to nuke the first 2 that you have, but then the other mobs are still going to run at you. And the big problem here is that Bone Spirit actually has a cooldown. Unlike the usual core skills, this one is not really spammable. So for the second option, that is the exact problem that we have to fix while theory crafting for the scaling Bone Spirit version. So the objective is clear. We need to reduce the cooldown completely. As you can see, we do have 12 seconds cooldown, but the cooldown is actually going to be reduced by 7 seconds whenever the Bone Spirit critically strikes. So we just need to get to 100% critical strike chance all of the time, and then we only have a 5-second cooldown remaining on our Bone Spirit. Unfortunately, increasing the rank on Bone Spirit doesn't help reducing the cooldown, so that option is completely out of the window. We can obviously further reduce the cooldown by having cooldown reduction on our helmet or the necklace, but that is still not going to help us reducing the Bone Spirit cooldown to a point where we can literally spam Bone Spirit. So while looking for an alternative, I actually looked through the planner and I found a very long and lost forgotten item. As you can see here, Blood Artisan's Cuirass actually becomes extremely useful for this build. Not only are we getting max life and ranks to Bone Spirit, but on top of that, we also get the legendary effect of whenever we are picking up 5 or 10 blood orbs, we generate a free Bone Spirit, dealing bonus damage based on our current life percent. So now we found a way to basically alternate between one free Bone Spirit coming from Blood Artisan's Cuirass and then using the normal Bone Spirit cast with the very low leftover cooldown, and then we can alternate between these two, basically spamming Bone Splinters and then making sure that we are fully prioritizing the Shattered Spirit's Obsidian Blade and actually instantly refilling our resource when we do so. After I understood what the core gameplay loop is actually going to look like, I wanted to fill in the gap, and I do this by using the following skill tree. As you can see, blood orbs are going to be extremely important for us, so obviously we are going to use Hemorrhage with the option or the baked-in option to generate blood orbs with a 20% chance. And we obviously also want to have enhanced hemorrhage, and then on top of that the 20% attack speed while healthy from Acolyte's Hemorrhage to increase the blood orb generation machine fully. Then afterwards we go for Unliving Energy because Bone Spirit is actually going to scale with our maximum essence. As you can see here on the very bottom of the first section on the skill, it says damage is increased by 3%, which is going to become 4% as soon as Season 3 launches, for each point of essence spent casting Bone Spirit. And then obviously Bone Spirit consumes all of your remaining essence, and obviously if you have 9 more from Unliving Energy, that very quickly becomes 36% more multiplicative damage for Bone Spirit. So extremely strong here. Then, as I was used to, I instantly spec'd more points into Imperfectly Balanced, but that doesn't give us anything because the Bone Spirit is actually not a core skill, so you can actually save these 3 points. And afterwards we want to have Hued Flesh also because there is a funny interaction that we get into later during the video. Then obviously I want to have Grim Harvest to further increase our resource generation, and Fueled by Death is also going to be extremely strong. Now, to be able to consume a lot of corpses, we obviously want to have Corpse Explosion together with Enhanced Corpse Explosion and Blighted Corpse Explosion. Explosion. This has been nerfed a little bit, but we don't really care that much about the nerf. We just want to have something that consumes the corpses, and BCE is actually the best thing to do so, in my opinion. Maybe we will get something that is a little bit better. Maybe we can use our skeletals, but I doubt it. I think BCE is going to be the trigger for consuming corpses, which is again something that I'm going to go into for that nice little interaction after the skill tree. Then next up, we want to have Decrepify because we want to further reduce any type of cooldowns that we have, for example for Bone Storm, or obviously further decrease the Bone Spirit cooldown. And since we use Decrepify, we also want to have Amplify damage to get that juicy 12% damage multiplier. And we want to have Corpse Tendrils together with Enhanced Corpse Tendrils to get to the Blighted Corpse Tendrils, so we produce even more Blood Orbs. Of course, we want to max out the Bone Spirit, and as you can see down here, we are going to go for the Dreadful Bone Spirit, which is going to become 30% essence over the next 4 seconds instead of just 30 essence. So a very good buff here that is coming up for Bone Spirit in terms of regaining all of your essence after using the Bone Spirit. Then we take all the points in the Bone Cluster right here, very strong for Bone Spirit obviously, and then just standard stuff with Bone Storm, 3 in Standalone, 3 in Momentum Mori, and then the leftover 2 in Inspiring Leader because we put 1 point in Ossified Essence. This build variant does have a problem at the moment though. Since we are running the Blighted Corpse Tendrils to generate more Blood Orbs, we actually don't have a reliable source of Vulnerable. Right now, I think there is 2 ways to solve this. We could either include Bone Prison because that is going to make stuff vulnerable that is inside of the Bone Prison, or the other way would be, maybe less reliable, to invest 3 points in Bone Splinters to get to the Initiate's Bone Splinters and therefore have a 20% chance per hit to make enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. But that would have 2 problems. Again, 20% is not that much, and you would actually have to run 2 basic skills here on your skill tree, which is kind of wasted. And we really need to have Hemorrhage to generate more Blood Orbs. Maybe the Blood Orb generation from Hemorrhage is going to be enough to fuel the Blood Artisan's Cuirass Bone Spirits, and we actually can swap back to Plagued Corpse Tendrils to have vulnerable all of the time in the build. But again, we will see how this goes as soon as I get my hands on the season. Paragon Board is extremely easy, standard bone skilled Paragon Board. I'm not going to go through everything here. I suggest you check out the link down in the description or the pinned comment below to get to the guide or the planner directly, and then check out the Paragon section for yourself. Now, since we said that it is going to be extremely important for us to generate Blood Orbs to keep the Blood Artisan's Cuirass Bone Spirit going on and on, I thought about putting Embalmer on the necklace. Therefore, every time you consume a corpse, which is basically your corpse explosion or your blighted corpse explosion, you will have a 45% chance to spawn a Blood Orb. Therefore, you will have a lot of Blood Orbs being generated. I put this on Amulet. Maybe the position here is going to change as soon as I get my hands on really playing Bone Spirit, but I think for the start, this is gonna be the correct spot. And then as soon as the season is live, we can actually reassess and see if that is maybe a little bit overkill, or maybe that is just right, and the corpse generation or the corpse consuming and therefore the Blood Orb generation is going to be just right. As I want to have as much corpse consumption going as possible, I added the Ring of the Sacrilegious Soul. Not only is it going to consume corpses for us, but it's also going to trigger corpse tendrils off cooldown. So whenever we don't have our corpse tendrils ourselves, then the Sacrilegious Soul is obviously going to cast it for us every 8 seconds, and therefore is also going to increase our Blood Orb generation even further. On the helmet, pretty standard stuff. Shielding Storm because we are playing Lidless Wall to have way more damage instances going around, triggering more lucky hit stuff. And then obviously we are benefiting from the Shielding Storm together with Lidless Wall with a permanent up time on Shielding Storm and therefore Bone Storm, which is obviously going to give us the 20% critical strike chance that we desperately need for Bone Spirit to keep it critting and therefore further reducing the cooldown, which is also going to help is that our Bone Storms are going to be spread around by the Lidless Wall, and therefore this is also going to trigger the Decrepify Lucky Hit, that is further going to reduce the cooldowns not only on our Bone Spirit, which is really important, but on top of that is also going to reduce the cooldowns on our Corpse Tendrils, therefore producing even more Blood Orbs. Then of course the bread and butter with the Blood Artisan's Cuirass on the chest, and we want to have Grasping Veins on our gloves, and as you can see, very important to have the crit chance and also the critical strike damage with bone skills. Currently, I've put the lucky hit chance to restore primary resource here on the gloves. I am not really sure if that is going to be the case in a week or 2 weeks when I actually test it. And next up, a very defensive pants with disobedience on them, which is going to be extremely easy to keep up because we have our Bone Storm constantly damaging everything, and also our Blighted Corpse Explosion is keeping up those disobedience stacks. Then on the boots, we want to run ranks of Corpse Tendrils to reduce the cooldown, and movement speed, all stats, intelligence. And on the boots, we are going to use the new aspect of adaptability, which is going to help us in both of the cases. It can actually help the player. Whenever we are casting our basic skills below 50%, then we generate 3 primary resource once per cast. So currently, I don't know how this is going to work with the Shattered Spirits. Are we going to get 3 more essence per bone splinter that is being cast? That is kind of depending on the coding of the Shattered Spirit in itself. Is this counted as 18 separate bone splinter casts, or is this actually just 1 cast of bone splinters? Are these things even bone splinters? This is definitely something that we need to work out and find out. But if this is actually 18 separate instances of bone splinters, then we are going to get a huge amount of primary resource back. And on top of that, whenever we are casting our basic skills above 50%, which is also a thing that we need to test, whenever we are triggering our Bone Spirit, the Bone Spirit is going to trigger 18 bone splinters, and these are going to get more damage due to us being above 50% maximum resource. As you can see, this looks like it's going to be a very interesting interaction. I really hope that it counts as separate instances of bone splinters, because that is going to be extremely interesting and funny. I will update you guys on how this is actually going to go. Then for the weapon, we want to have a sword to get that implicit for the critical strike damage. Int all stats crit. And the amulet is very important to have the ranks of all macabre skills, which is basically Bone Spirit in this case. And we also want to have cooldown reduction to reduce the cooldown of the Bone Spirit. The ring that is not the Sacrilegious Soul needs to have the Serration, but I really want to have either Edgemasters or Conceited in this build. I currently didn't have the option to fit those 2 in. Maybe further down the line I can find a way to fit these in, but for now Serration is going to give us the highest multiplier of them all. And I really think that we need the resource generation on the ring here to make sure that we are instantly refilling our essence whenever we have emptied it by pressing Bone Spirit. For the class mechanic, it's a little bit different than for the Bone Spear version, for example. We still sacrifice our skirmishes for the crit. This time we sacrifice the Shadow Mages. Usually we don't do this because maximum essence is a worse multiplier for Bone Spear than the increased vulnerable damage is, but for Bone Spirit, the maximum essence here is actually the better multiplier, because if you remember, Bone Spirit has a 4 multiplier per 1 maximum essence that you have, so this obviously becomes 60 and therefore is really strong. And then again, the Iron Golem is pretty standard stuff to increase the critical strike damage by 30x. For the season mechanic, I can't really predict how it's going to look like. I suggest you just check out what the Max Roll build guide is going to tell you in 1 or 2 days after the season, because that is going to be updated extremely quickly. I think this is going to be a very interesting build because you will instantly nuke every boss out of its existence, and I think the additional bone splinters generated by the Shattered Spirits are gonna be extremely funny to look at. So I'm really curious how this build is going to go. Obviously, I'm going to be playing this live on stream and also gonna be racing in the hardcore solo self-found race as soon as the season releases. Last time I was actually able to come in number 1 for the hardcore solo self-found Necromancer, and I actually came in number 2 in the world just behind Woody. So if you want to check that out, Again, the links are going to be down in the description and in the pinned comment below. But way more important than that, if you like content similar to this, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time.